Okay, we are live. So
Yay.
I'm Anna Judson, and today I have a guest in my studio, well, across the Atlantic, in another studio. But please join me for a conversation with Rachael Sage. She's a
Hello.
musician, singer-songwriter, poet, painter, dancer, founder of the Empress record label, and so much more. Lately, she's been writing, recording, releasing music, making gorgeous videos, touring in the US and the UK, and plenty of other things. So, we've got so much to talk about today. So, let's get started. So, welcome, Rachael.
Thank you so much. You were my wake up call making sure that I show up to Mother's Day on time later. So thank you for
Oh, yeah, well,
that.
you're very welcome. Exactly. Squeezing
that's
everything in.
that's my joke for all the folks like me who are musical vampires out there who stay up till 4 in the morning and sleep in. So
So, are you more of a late night person?
I am exclusively a late night person. Yes. So I tend to do all my creative work in the wee hours, like between, I don't know, 10 p.m. and 4 a.m.
Okay.
But I think I'm also, a day person too. I run my business during the day and I feel very focused, but more on the biz. And then
Yeah.
when everybody goes to sleep is when I wake up.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. Do you sleep?
I do, not enough,
Okay.
but I sleep, maybe 5.5, 6 hours a night on average.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think sleep
Yeah.
is
How
so
about you? Do
important.
you sleep? Or are you like Prince?
Okay, yeah, no, I do sleep. It's a new thing. I've
Yeah, I bet.
discovered ways to
Because
kind of get there and
because you lead
but
many lives and you're very prolific as well. So,
so
yeah.
yeah, and I just think that sleeping is definitely where it's at for
It
me.
is. It's where we dream, right? And where we,
Exactly. And you sort things out and you wake up with a new sort of
that's true.
a new thing. Well, so now we're talking about sleep, but so that's a good topic. But so in general, how are you?
I'm good. I whipped this outfit together for you because I know it's important to be fabulous on the live streams. And I wanted to just let you know that I follow you and everything you're doing. And I think you're amazing. And I look forward to all of your posts on Facebook and hearing about your music and all of your adventures. So you're someone who I greatly admire. And I just love that we're able to do this with you in France and me in upstate New York. It's so
It's
great.
awesome. Well, it's awesome. I thank you so much for everything you just said, but you just flipped the
I
question.
did, I did. And I think part of that is because I'm still waking up. But the main thing is I have a new album in the works. And I know that's what we're here to talk about
Yeah.
in part. I've already put out one of the singles, as you know,
Hmm.
Whistle Blow. And
Hmm.
then we have a whole bunch more coming out, which is a little new for me. I used to just put one or two tracks out and then the full meal, the full album.
Yeah.
But the kids today,
Exactly.
they have a little harder time focusing on the full thing. So it's exciting for me because I naturally like to create visuals for each song. And in the
Yeah.
past, I felt like, oh, there wasn't time, or it's sort of indulgent to do that for more than just your single. But now this has sort of granted me permission to create short films or videos for much more of the album. I think I'm
Yeah.
doing 6 videos overall, and the
Yeah.
next song that comes out will be the title track, The Other Side. And right before I logged on, I was actually looking at a rough cut of my new video for that, which was exciting. So,
Oh, that's
um,
super exciting.
yeah, lots in the works.
Yeah. So I've got so many questions for you. So
Dive in.
yeah. Okay. Well, let's first just talk about the album itself. When you're, it's like when you write a record, every time it's a different process, like different things come up.
That's true.
And what's the story of this record?
Well, essentially, this album was written over a period of a year or maybe a year and a half after I completed my spoken word record, Poetica,
Hmm.
which was just entirely spoken word and instrumental music. This was kind of me back to my singer songwriterly,
Hmm.
somewhat confessional self with a few dips into cover tunes as well that are more so obscure. Most people will probably think they're my songs, but they feel like they were from my heart.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's sort of my post-lockdown record, I guess. The
Mm.
title obviously is sort of, multifaceted, the other side of us all going through so many things together. The other
Yeah.
side could be, of a relationship, physical also. I moved to the Hudson Valley during that time. And so I am on the other side, and I'm upstate and right at the river, at the creek. So,
Mm. Mm.
and it's also kind of reflective of the political landscape in some ways, but more about the conversations that aren't happening and the attempts to try to actually connect in the midst of so much,
Yeah.
I guess chaos and dissent and divergence. And I am that person who always wants to have those hard conversations in a
Mm.
very neutral, loving, and open way. I'm a bit of a sophista hippie that way. So I kind of put myself in the middle of that concept, and then the songs, address different aspects of polarities, really.
Mm. If you were hosting a conversation about your record, what are some of the conversations that would come up?
Well, isn't that's what we're doing, right? Let's see. Hosting a conversation
You're the
about my
host.
record.
Yeah. Well, I
Oh,
mean,
like what are the questions I would ask myself?
or what if, no, I'm
That's very
sorry.
meta. I like it.
Yeah, no, that's what I didn't mean to do that. What I meant was in your songs, you're talking about the need for connection and to have these conversations. What are they?
Well, let me think about the front of the record and kind of flow through
Yeah.
on the fly. Whistleblow, as we mentioned, is out now, and it is a song that's unabashedly about discovering that your leaders, your heroes, anyone in a position of supposed authority and power, may be failing in their responsibilities and or crossing boundaries entirely in a way that's
Mhm.
just not right, not just or appropriate. So it started out as a specific story about a public figure, and I don't like to name because I think it's broader than that at this point.
Yeah.
And then as things rolled on, there were so many different emergences, if that's a word,
Mhm.
of scenarios that fit that idea, that by the time I actually went to sing it in the studio, it had gone through a lot of different meanings for me. But what I take away from it now is that it's really about that moment where one is able to summon the courage to stand up for oneself amidst these scenarios. So it's sort of flipped. It's more about
Mhm.
the person who's willing to raise their hand and say, this happened, this wasn't right, here's my story.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that goes into that moment. So that's what was most interesting to me. It's not only about that declaration, but about, what's required of oneself, what goes into the character of someone who is able to be brave in that way, or just to finally, share their story when so many others can't, when so many others don't have that
Mhm.
wherewithal. And so that's really what I'm taking a look at in that particular song.
Wow. That's great. And as you were describing it, I was just thinking how that moment is very personal and individual. Individual people rise to the challenge,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also super public, and other people are involved, and it inspires other people. But we're
Yes.
definitely seeing this in the news of this week and last
Mm-hmm.
week, and yeah, it's a story.
Every week. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But every song is different. I think of each song as a little mini movie, really. So I
I
don't know.
love
I could
that.
just pick one or two off the top of my head, but I have a little more trouble kind of trying to fold entire albums into one, premise, only because at heart I'm a poet and I'm looking for those intersections of themes, but at the same time, they're very different. They overlap and then they
Yeah.
create a larger whole. So Another
Absolutely.
song that would, I'll pick one on the complete opposite end of the seriousness spectrum. There's another song called Deepest Dark that I actually wrote when I was in my teens. And it just never really fit on an album. I didn't quite know what it meant. I don't know if you can relate to that. Sometimes we write from more of a subconscious or
Mm,
abstract place. And I liked the song, but it didn't feel complete to me. And for years I thought, oh, it's because it needs a bridge, and I'll put it away, and
yeah.
someday I'll write a bridge. It has verses and choruses and some music, but that's not really what it was. It was just that its time had not come. So
Mm.
when I started watching the TV series Stranger Things, and I thought I was last to watch it. You know, it's such a zeitgeist moment. Everybody was watching it under lockdown. I don't know if you've seen it,
I didn't see
but it's fantastic, and it's one of those very suspend your disbelief type of series with some sci-fi and a lot of humor, but also very much about relationships of young people, how they get each other through, how they form these incredible formative bonds, and the magic that's derived from that. And there's so much to be learned from those types of coming of age stories
it.
where teenagers, young people band together and do amazing things together and kind of beat the adults in a way with their ingenuity and their sensitivity, sort of like a sci-fi version of Stand By Me. And I thought that, my song Deepest Dark took on a new meaning because the lyrics really are about finding each other through the darkness, through the abyss, the seeming abyss, and
Mhm.
even from great distances apart, and somehow, getting each other through and knowing that, I'm all the way over here, you're all the way over there, and whatever the circumstances may be, we've got each other.
Yeah.
So that's also a different part of the other side, long distance relationships and,
Mhm.
and energies, being able to stay connected against
Mhm.
all odds.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So as you're talking about younger people, I was just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, the state of the world, which we mentioned earlier, and it's something that I think about quite a bit. And what is it like? Where are we right now? But I was
Mm-hmm.
also thinking about how optimistic it is to think about younger people who do
Yeah,
connect, who do communicate, and maybe even also are going to fight the fight that needs to be fought right now. That
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's so interesting. And also that you've got a beautiful record to come, and you're also touring around the release.
Yeah, I just did a couple of weeks of shows in the US with a wonderful co-bill artist, Annalise and Ryan. And
Mhm.
they live with me here in Beacon. And I met
Okay.
them recently and just fell in love with their music. So
Oh,
that was fun because I haven't done a
funny.
lot of that, touring with another artist where you're both rotating who's going first and see you
Mm.
tomorrow. And, wasn't that great? Like, what did we learn about this? And you can sing on my song and I'll play on yours.
Oh,
And like, I just loved it. And I hope I get to do more with them. It was fantastic. And now I get to go out by myself with my fabulous accompanist, Kelly Halloran on
yeah,
violin,
yeah,
which is always a treat. So we're headed overseas. We're going to be in England in less than 2 weeks. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready.
yeah. So I'm sure you are ready.
Well,
But packing up and moving and packing up and bringing your gear across the Atlantic into the
mm,
UK, is that easy?
of course not. Nothing worth
S-
doing is easy. But
So is
sometimes we don't always bring everything. Sometimes we uh, uh, borrow or we leave
yeah.
things there in between. Actually, I'm doing two short tours, well, not short, but few weeks at a time, tours of the UK and coming back for a bit in between to the US. And I did that last year too. It's just how it
Yeah.
shook out. And so we're actually renting a storage locker and throwing
Yeah.
all the gear in it so we don't have to fly back and forth. And it's just financially, it's super cheap to do.
Mm,
And for, a week and a half, 2 weeks, my stuff will be there.
yeah.
We get back from the airport, we drive by and pick it up. And, you figure out ways to do things. But
Yeah.
also, I do pack very, very light when I tour.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And it's cool because I lay out all my colorful clothes and I think, who am I right now? And or maybe who will I be in 2 weeks and what will I want to kind of, you know, work my way into? And sometimes it's totally different from maybe what I brought the tour in the US or, you know, my favorite go-to things in general. It's like I'm kind of thinking about the essence of what I want to say
Yeah.
and the how I want to project that on stage. And if there are big festivals that I'm playing, that's going to be a whole other level of sparkle and
Yeah.
excitement.
Yeah. So, so color is really important to
Oh,
you.
it's maybe the most important thing to me.
You're
And
a
I
colorist.
think about music that way too. I think about
Okay.
dynamics. Um, I don't know if clinically I have synesthesia, but I think I
That's
live my life as though I do. So maybe I do. It's hard to examine these things in one's brain.
self-imposed.
I don't know. I've always been this way since I
Mhm.
was a kid. I think part of it was a rejection of having to wear a school uniform for
Mhm.
many years, which I loathed. And I also
Mhm.
felt like the goal of it, which was to sort of equalize everyone in one sense,
Yeah.
um, it backfired completely, at least at my school. Instead of it just making it easy for people to not think about, you know, I don't know, differences in terms of clothing, what people had, what people didn't, which I think may have been the goal of it. It just flattened out everyone's expressiveness and that sort of got, you know, transformed into meanness and other ways of
Mhm.
like competing. And, you know, instead of being expressive, it was, oh, like, are you wearing, you know, polo socks or like, are you, you know, going to go to that cool party or, you know, and I found that when I eventually went to a school where you could kind of do whatever you wanted and everybody
Mhm.
could be whoever they were, you found your own tribe more easily. You know, there was less interest in one group of people picking on another. It was like,
Mhm.
okay, these sort of popular people over here are at their table. The artsy, nerdy people are over here. You know, we all just got to be ourselves, and it was much
Yeah.
easier to kind of wave your flag and without
Yeah.
even thinking about it,
Yeah.
and just, you know, connect with people the same way as an adult you do in
Mhm.
a room. You know, and you're like, oh, let me go talk to them, and they seem interesting, and I don't know. So I find the outward expression of one's spirit to be, you know, quite substantive, actually.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. One thing you just said was, it was easier when people could just be themselves. And
Yeah.
that's a theme that I've been returning to a lot lately. It's about
Yes.
the most important thing is for everyone to be themselves and to
Oh,
not go
yes.
through all these shenanigans about,
Yeah. It's just
being
ridiculous.
for somebody else. It's the
Yeah.
key. It's so central.
It takes
And
us
it's
so long to find that too
oddly
in our
such hard
lives.
work.
And
Yeah.
it's such a simple idea. And, you know, whether it's parents, well meaning, but, you know, misguided parents or
Yeah.
teachers or just our society at large, it is such an uphill battle to keep sight of that.
Yeah. I
But I think
think that
we're ambassadors of that for sure.
yay. Well, I sincerely hope so, but I do think it does take a lot of work to get there and or
Hmm.
to at least trust it. And I think it's like
Mm.
authority figures, governments,
Yep.
school systems, they don't trust that people are fine as they are.
That's an
People have to
interesting way to look at it. It's true. I also think that there are value systems that we grow up with that we assume are correct, and it takes us a
Mhm.
while to dismantle them or to
Mhm.
just find different ways of keeping what works and letting go of what doesn't. You know,
Mhm.
I certainly feel that way about even my own beautiful heritage that's so important to me, and that's so interwoven into my life, my Judaism.
Mhm.
But there are things, you know, early on that I took on and that I took literally that I have since shed. And
Mhm.
it's a big tent and it's evolving. And I think there's room to be utterly yourself and
Mhm.
do no harm, as it were. and to also embrace one's culture and heritage
Yeah.
without inheriting all of the neuroses, if you will, of past generations
Right.
who, you know, we're evolving.
Exactly. Well, I guess, it's not all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to either take all. Yeah, exactly. That's so interesting. So, so right now, your writing and your poetry, your songs, your work, is Judaism coming up as a theme or
Mm.
narratives in it, or is it just something that's around you?
I think it's just always there. You know, there have been albums where I've had one or two songs that were overtly Jewishy in one way or another, whether it was the music and some of the go-to uh, harmonizing, or lyrically some allusions to liturgical things that seeped in, you know, my upbringing.
Hmm.
But I don't think specifically now. On Poetica, there were a few that came up, and I think it's just like anybody's culture or upbringing they may have it. You kind of write about what you know, or
Yeah,
um, you use metaphors that may be resonant more universally, but the specific metaphor comes from something, you know, that you may have learned in Hebrew school, or
right.
you know, kind of in the Leonard Cohen,
Exactly.
excuse me, way, where
Mm,
you know he certainly utilized his Jewish influence to express wider themes.
exactly. Yeah. Very interesting. You mentioned that you've moved to upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of people right now, they find themselves in places outside of the big city because they moved there during the pandemic. Like
That's right. Yeah.
where I'm from, Maine, the population in Maine increased incredibly during the pandemic, and I'm
Mm.
sort of wondering if that's the way it is now, or are people going to return to the city? Where are you with that sort of
Mm. Oh, well,
migration?
that's an easy one for me. I mean,
Mm.
I moved here fully intending to always still go back to New York frequently. So,
Okay. Yeah.
you know, it's part of why I love it here too. It's an hour and a half train ride away. And that's nothing for us touring
Yeah.
artists, you know. It's reading a book on a train. It's, you know,
Yeah.
doing some emails and, you know, if you're alone in the car, making some phone calls.
Yeah.
So, I just enjoy, it's kind of like being able to focus out, you know, on a lens in photography. Now I get to have different perspectives on the city than I did when I was in
Hmm.
it all the time.
Hmm.
I still do some of my label work in the city. I play a bunch of shows there
Hmm.
ongoing. Sometimes I just have to dip in to see some peers perform or go to an art exhibit.
Yeah.
But what I found here in the Hudson Valley is a different type of community.
Mm.
And it was slow coming to it because, of course, in the pandemic, wherever you were, it was difficult to meet people and forge new friendships when everyone's
Right.
like, stay over there across the street, you know,
Right.
even in a small city or a town. So, um, but as we started to emerge from that, and given that this is such an outdoorsy kind of a place,
Mm.
um, except when there's a snowstorm,
Yeah.
you know, I was gradually meeting lovely, open, artistic folks on my long walks or walking on Main
Yeah.
Street. And the Main Street here is like something out of a movie. It's
Yeah. Mm.
so charming, and it's long, you know. And I would tell my parents when I first moved here, they're like, "Is there enough going on there for you, honey? You know, like you're such a New Yorker." I was like, you know, there's one of everything I need. It's such a novel concept. It's kind of like Buddhism meets consumerism, you know? It's like,
Mm.
how many boutiques do I need on a main street? How many dentists do there have to be in a town, you know?
Right.
So now I'm getting to know everyone so well. And
Mm.
last night I actually I had my first art piece in a local gallery in a group
Oh,
show.
that's great.
So it was fun, you know. Oh,
Congratulations.
thank you. You know, but it
Yeah.
was just sort of a natural thing. It was the complete opposite of what it might have required to do that in New York City.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
have to pitch. it was like I was naturally falling into a community where
Right.
the occasion arose to submit something casually, and they were like, yeah, this is great, like you should be part of this. And it's just a whole different vibe, and I love both. I also love the
Right.
challenge of the deep thought and sort of longer term strategy that has to go into sort of getting into a very busy, glutted, world class scene like New York City.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I have to say, it's refreshing and encouraging to be in a more intimate arts community where I know more people and I
Hmm.
see them running my errands, and
Hmm.
it's just a different energy.
Definitely. There's something, obviously so healthy about, trees and river.
Mm,
Oh, of course, in Manhattan, you have trees and rivers also, or water, bodies of water. But
mm-hmm.
it's so
Less
healthy to be able to,
downtown. Like downtown, it's not as park and tree
yeah,
rich, but
yeah.
yes,
But it's there.
the
You can
Central
get to
Park.
it. You can
Yeah.
get to it. But yeah, it definitely on a cellular level, I think that when you make that kind of change, you really
Mm-hmm.
feel it.
It's
It's
true.
it's
Every
but
morning I
what
look
you
out and I see the mountain, and I hear
oh
the
wow.
creek out my window, and I lift up my window and it's like, oh, and little birds singing.
That's so meditative, the
Yeah,
birds.
it
That's like
is.
we hear birds here. So, but also you mentioned the community and the connection. And I
Mm,
think that like right now there's all these reports and discussion about how loneliness is epidemic in the States and
mm,
globally, like during the pandemic, post-pandemic, people are suffering from isolation still and loneliness. And I was reading an article about loneliness affects your health and other things like that.
mm.
But this idea about being connected to neighbors and
Yeah,
relationships that aren't maybe the most important relationship in your life, but that are
right.
part of something.
That's
It's really
true. I've
interesting, and I
I've read
think
those articles too, where it's even just knowing the local folks at your local store or on
it's
your block or
something.
whatever, it can add lifespan, like
Yeah.
just those daily interactions of knowing your neighbors and saying hello and being out of yourself. But sorry I interrupted you, but
Yeah. No.
I
No.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so just what you were describing sounds just very idyllic. And then you have a well-crafted life because you've got New York City, the
Hmm.
most amazing city ever.
It
And
is.
then you've got your countryside, and then you've got your touring in Europe and
It's
your
funny. I think of it as countryside here, sort of, but the folks who've grown up here do not. I mean, it's Beacon is
right.
basically a city, but it
Yeah, yeah.
feels so much smaller to me. But yeah, I think I do. I'm getting closer to balance, and that has been the
Mm,
goal.
mm,
I tour a lot, which I love, and I don't
mhm.
know if you can relate to this, but post pandemic or mostly post, it's just so revelatory to kind of cast a line and reel in a gig. So, I'm saying yes to a lot, and I
Mhm.
might actually have said no to more before the pandemic. And some people are telling me the opposite. They're like, oh, I'm really only doing what absolutely this, that, and the other. And they've got a whole list of like parameters. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, I want to get out and connect, and I want to play, and I want to get better. And every time I'm off the road, I feel like I lose a little bit of my chops. And then you
Mhm.
ramp up again to being warm on stage and having all
Mhm.
these songs at your fingertips. And then that's when I feel like I grow,
Mhm.
is when I can go beyond just playing the songs that I wrote and into being more connected to the current repertoire as a whole. Um, the performance energy sometimes leads to new writing energy,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I go back to the hotel room at night, or and write on the guitar, or I have a song idea in the car and I just have to write it down in a journal.
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like I grow the most, even more than just being at home and enjoying my
Yeah.
newfound.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, so interesting. Earlier you were talking about the new approach of releasing an album, taking a
Mm,
little bit more time, releasing a song at a time. That's
yeah,
the general discussion, I think, right now
right.
is to release singles and maybe spend a bit more time. And you mentioned that you're producing videos
Hmm.
around 5 or 6 of the singles. Are there other new kinds of events or work that you will also build to accompany your songs now that you have more time to
Yeah, I love
work with
that
each?
question because, it's like Einstein always said, it's insane to do things the same way and expect a different result. So essentially, um, and I do strive to have a different result with each project. I think there's that bed of hope that we always are immersed in, which is increasing our audience and fortifying those listeners that we already have and keeping them engaged and inspiring them. It's because it is like a dialogue, But this album, I actually created artwork to go with each song.
Oh, wow.
So there will be in the physical version of my album, there's going to be a little gallery kind of in the package, and that will be sort of held in a clever way in the middle of the package. And they're loose, they're separate art cards. And then when you flip
Mm,
them over, there'll be the lyrics. And I just, I'd done like
brilliant.
those hardcover books before, and I love them. They feel so substantial, and I did those for the last two albums, and I was really happy with them. My tour manager didn't like them so much because they're heavy.
Yeah,
She was
yeah,
like, "Oh my
right.
God, we have to schlep, however many hundreds of these to England." Like, ugh.
Y-
Um, so
y-
part of this was a practical decision. I was like,
Mhm.
what can I do that's lighter, a little bit different, and it's going to surprise people, and also encourages folks to want to have that interaction with the physical package,
Mhm.
even if they're it's mostly going to stream it or
Right,
download it.
right.
So I thought, well, let me give them something that is unique and you can't get on in any other format. So I'm not releasing like a digital version of this gallery. It's at least for now.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just finalized this morning. So
Congratulations.
thank you. But yeah, it was fun to select which piece went with which song, and that also, enables me to tell the story in a different way and perhaps, reveal these pieces on social media as we go
Mm-hmm.
along. So that'll
Mm-hmm.
be different as well.
Mm-hmm. That's neat. So you bring into your work you bring in your poetry, you bring in your artwork and design,
I do. And
your
I feel so
dance.
lame that I have no artwork that you can see here. If we
Lame.
flipped it around, it would all be in front of you, but this
Okay.
is like where I record, so
This, so are there is and you used to dance as a or do you still
I
dance?
did.
Yeah.
Only around my living room and on
Okay.
stage a little bit.
Yeah.
I was a professional ballerina in my teens, and it's such a strange thing to say because I look back and I was like, I was a child.
Uh,
But my first paying jobs were dancing with New York City Ballet and
wow.
performing at Lincoln Center. And it was an amazing experience. It was hard won. I worked my tuchus off, as we say. I was not a normal kid in any way. I didn't like
Mm,
just hang out after school. I was immediately on that train to New York City. I left school early most of the time and went to rehearsals and got home at 10 at night. And this was the norm every day of
mhm.
the week once I was, you know, 14 or so. So, there were some sacrifices, like dessert, but I wouldn't trade any of it. I absolutely love the experience, and I wish it could have gone on a bit longer, but it started to kind of interfere with academics, and that was the point at which my folks had the hard talk with me
Mhm.
that, honey, this is great. It was a great extracurricular, et cetera, but in this family, we like our children to go to college. And I was like, no. So then my life went in a bit of a different direction. And I was already focused on music and loved acting. So I just kind of went further down those paths.
Yeah.
But it's all in there.
Yeah, it's all in there.
I've still got the port-de-bras.
It is all in there, which is just wonderful about like watching you work, watching you produce, seeing what you make. It is all in there, and I'm wondering, is there more? Is there more? Do you cook also, or
No, and that's really hilarious that you asked me that, because last night after, excuse me, I'm getting verklempt. After this art gallery opening, one of my neighbors, who is also a wonderful artist, really talented, she said, "Why don't you come by? We'll have a cup of tea, blah, blah, blah." I was like, okay. And I'd never actually been to her place. We've just encountered each other on walks and heading back to our building. And she cooked for me. And it was just so lovely. Like, she was like, "Oh, I'm going to make some dinner. You should stay. Do you eat macrobiotic, blah, blah, blah." I was like, "You don't have to do that." Like, no, let's just have tea and I'll let you go on with your night. And she's like, "No, I insist." And she made the most beautiful meal. And it was specific to what I know she and I, how we eat. We're both cancer thrivers, and it was very clean. And it was like quinoa and vegetables and every color vegetable. So many people would feel that type of cooking was bland, or, there wasn't much going on other than revealing the natural beauty of these vegetables. But for me, it's the exact kind of food I love to eat.
Yeah.
And even the way she prepared it, it was steamed. And just the fact that it was so colorful too. It was very artful. Yeah. And she was like, "You must cook. You're such an artist. You must cook." And I'm like, not really. So it was a big treat for me.
That's beautiful. That's really nice to have somebody cook for you. And
it was unbelievable. I want to buy her a plant today and leave it at the doorstep. Yeah.
But it was probably a gift for her too, to have you there.
Well,
some people really enjoy cooking for other people.
That's true.
I don't.
Are you? No.
No. It would make me nervous. I was just thinking, I wonder what I would cook for Rachel if I had her over. I'm not sure what I would cook for you.
I'm great at creating almost like the British version of tea, but in my own savory way. Like, extending buying the gourmet foods and laying out the nice cheese and crackers and fruit. Like, I make that all look very lovely. And I've had a few friends over now at my new place in Beacon, and that's what I do. I go to the cheese shop and I get some grapes and I put out pretty plates and, some Martinellis and tea and whatever. And that I'm all about. I don't know what you call that, but
I call it arranging. I'm always people do like, "Did you make that?" I'm like, "No, I arranged it."
Exactly. I'm curating.
It's absolutely, and it's absolutely important to make a beautiful table and to spread. And to think about the shapes and the colors. And I can imagine how beautiful you would make that table in front of you.
I have fun with it.
Because you do make things beautiful. That's part of the work that you produce. It's not that it's polished to the end, that you polish the life out of it beautiful. It's beautiful.
Although I have done that on occasion and checked myself. So it's interesting to say that, because I, as a producer and arranger and a painter really now too, that moment where we need to step back and say, is this already finished? Is it okay? There's some negative space over here, or some space in the track for the vocal to breathe. Do I need a horn section or just one horn? So I actually really enjoy, kind of reckoning with whether something is too polished or if it would benefit from a little bit more rawness. So I think about that often.
Yeah, I do too. I was just explaining to a producer the other day that I love sculpture and I love the polish of marble, and I love where you still see the chisel marks where they've, and that it's not polished. I think that's something I look for.
It's more dynamics to play with, and where to reveal where something is kind of just it's got that edge. Yeah, when things are too smooth, I kind of check out because
Yeah.
it all starts to seem the same.
Right. Exactly. That wouldn't suit you.
But thank you for
Um,
saying I make beautiful things. That is part of my mission.
mm,
But also to reveal
yeah.
beauty in unlikely
Yeah.
places or scenarios,
Yeah.
imagery. Because I feel like since I was a young kid, that's been a big part of who I am, is to see and hear things in daily life or in even darker realms that have a beauty to them, and being able to unearth that or at least spotlight it may even be less of a creative thing than an ability to see and hear, So it's sort of like,
Mhm.
how do I get out of my own way here and sort of
Mhm.
like push the sand aside and reveal what's already there that maybe some people are kind of just walking right past.
Right. That's what I feel. I've always felt that the difference between poetry and songwriting is that, yeah, I mean, there are many cases when this
Yeah.
isn't the truth, but songwriting tells in general a story, whether there's a
Hmm.
story that's abstracted or something, but there's usually a story in there, and poetry may have a story or not, but
Hmm.
poetry illuminates something. That's how I see it. Like when a
Yeah, I
poem
love that.
really knocks me off, or when I'm just like, wow, I see it as light. I see it as like an illumination. Um, and
That's
so
beautiful. Wow.
there may be a story, but that's interesting.
I
You
think
as
I'm
a
probably
poet,
greedy. I probably try to do both, like
that
in different.
way,
I especially try to illuminate in songs,
yeah, yeah,
or not try to, but I am
but it's
attracted.
happening.
I'm attracted to moments that have that opportunity where
Yeah,
something can be illuminated. I don't always get there, but I'm trying to ask the questions at least.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's the listener who has to get there. It's
There you go.
so they're part of it too. So we've got a couple minutes left in our
Mm.
conversation today. And so is there anything that you want to make sure that we talk about, or where you would like people to find your music, or
Oh,
what would
sure.
like people to know? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, people can find me at rachelsage.com. And I spell it a little quirky, Rachael, and sage, like the herb. Um, and yeah, I think it's great to connect with me there. I have an email list and I send out newsletters once a month. But I'm on social media all the time. I love Instagram. I love that I can share visuals there. I do Facebook still. That's probably where I engage with people the most. And I welcome, people to post on my page. I love all that. Just if they keep it respectful, right? And yeah, I'm going to be on the road on and off for the rest of the year, starting in England, but we're going to do some shows in the US in July, and then September through the end of the year I'll be touring as much as I can over there.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. Maybe we can do a
So
show together. We've talked about it, but
I know we've talked about
we'll
it.
make it
We could,
happen.
yeah, exactly. And before I let you go,
Yeah.
we've talked about your work and a variety of things, but so
Hmm.
what's your superpower?
I think empathy. It's like an easy
Mm,
one to just. I try to think of it that way because, listen, you can too much empathy can actually feel oppressive, and we know what that is. That's like you're taking on other people's stuff.
mhm.
But I try to think I've flipped it around by now, and hopefully it can just be an entry point to understanding and connecting and creating friendships where appropriate.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a treat for me to have this conversation. Your
Oh,
morning, my
likewise.
afternoon.
I love it.
Yeah. So
You're
excellent.
amazing. Keep
Uh,
doing the wonderful work you're doing, and you know, just having these conversations. I am such a fan of what you do.
thank you so much. Right back at you. All right.
Yay.
So
And happy
thank you.
Mother's Day.
Thank you. So, see you later.
Okay.